Have you ever wondered why you feel tired, even before the day has really started? Or why, no matter how hard you try to get things done, you still feel drained by afternoon? You're not alone. Most people try to get ahead by managing their time or pushing themselves to work harder, but this usually leads to stress and burnout, not real progress. The Energy Code, a system to never be tired again, offers a different approach. What if you could actually see where your energy goes every day? And just as importantly, learn how to stop the invisible drains that wear you down. Imagine knowing how to build simple routines that keep you feeling sharp and focused, not just for an hour or two, but all day long. And instead of relying on bursts of motivation, you'd have a clear, step-by-step way to turn small changes into big results, without getting stuck in the old cycle of working too hard and burning out. You don't need more motivation or complicated tricks. You need a system that works with real life, one that helps you feel steady, focused, and in control. Even if other productivity methods have failed you, this book will show you a new way to boost your energy and get more out of every day without running yourself into the ground. Let's get started. It's time to take your energy back. Chapter 1: The Energy Problem. Your laptop is open. Your coffee is hot. Your calendar shows 3 hours of focus time blocked in green. Yet 30 minutes later, you've toggled between 6 tabs, answered 2 Slack messages, and produced exactly 1 mediocre paragraph. The effort feels enormous. The output looks pathetic. And the worst part? You can't figure out why. This isn't a time management problem. You have the hours. You've read the productivity books, tried the Pomodoro timers, color-coded your tasks by priority. You know what to do. But when you sit down to do it, something's missing. The engine turns over, but nothing catches. You're managing minutes when the real constraint is something else entirely. Usable energy you can direct on command. Most people never name this problem correctly, so they solve the wrong thing. They add more hours, more tools, more discipline, pouring effort into a system that's already leaking from a dozen invisible holes. This chapter resets the frame. You'll see why work harder fails when your battery is empty, what winning actually looks like in this game, and the exact path from survival mode to creative dominance. The wattage problem you're not tracking. Look at your last work week. Count the meetings, the emails, the quick syncs. Now count the hours you spent in deep, uninterrupted creation, the kind of work that moves your most important projects forward. If you're like most knowledge workers, the ratio is brutal. Busy calendars everywhere, but shallow work output. Here's what's happening under the surface. Every context switch, Slack to email to document to meeting, leaves cognitive residue. Your attention doesn't flip cleanly between tasks like a light switch. Part of your processing power stays stuck on the last thing, degrading performance on the next thing. You're running 10 browser tabs in your brain, and each one costs watts you can't afford to spend. The math is simple but vicious. High effort plus constant switching equals low meaningful throughput. You finish the day exhausted, but when someone asks what you shipped, you struggle to name one complete thing. The work felt hard, the fatigue is real, but the output doesn't match the energy spent. This is the hidden cost of push harder. You sprint heroically through a deadline, fueled by adrenaline and guilt. You hit send at midnight, crash for 2 days, then spend the next week operating at 60% while your mood swings and your judgment degrades. Mistakes slip through. Small decisions take forever. Your reputation starts to hinge not on your best work, but on whether people catch you on a good day or a bad one. The real levers aren't more hours or stronger willpower. They're energy inputs. What charges you, energy leaks, what drains you invisibly, and energy-directed outputs, what you deliberately create when you're actually charged. Winners in this game protect their prime hours with unapologetic boundaries. They know that 2 protected 90-minute blocks beat 8 fractured hours every single time. And they understand that systemization compounds, habits beat heroics because habits don't require negotiation every morning. The spiral you're already in. If you don't fix this, here's the trajectory. Urgent tasks will keep crowding out strategic work. Every quarter, your creative quality will drop a little more. You'll stay busy, maybe even get promoted, but your career will stall because you're not shipping the work that actually builds your reputation. Meanwhile, cognitive debt piles up. Decision fatigue reduces your accuracy and speed. Perfectionism and rumination inflate the cost of every task, so even simple things feel like climbing a mountain. And because you never recover properly, burnout risk climbs while your capacity shrinks. You're paying interest on energy you borrowed months ago, and the bill keeps growing. This isn't a scare tactic. It's pattern recognition. You've probably already felt the early signs. The 3 p.m. crash that used to be occasional is now daily. The project you were excited about now feels like a slog. The weekend doesn't recharge you anymore because you're too depleted to rest properly. What winning looks like, first pass. Here's the good news. You don't need to overhaul your entire life to see results. On your first pass through this system, you'll build a daily energy plan you trust. That means 2 protected deep work corridors on your calendar, non-negotiable blocks where your best work happens. You'll create a 1-page energy equation snapshot that tracks your inputs, leaks, and outputs so you can see the math instead of guessing. And you'll install 1 keystone rep, a single daily recovery action that you perform no matter what, scheduled like a meeting. You'll also run a drain audit and kill 1 leak per week. Maybe it's the Slack channel that pulls you into every minor fire. Maybe it's the perfectionism loop that keeps you rewriting the same paragraph 5 times. You'll identify your top 3 leaks, create a ship criteria checklist to prevent over-polishing, and install a 90-second pre-commit review so you stop saying yes to things that don't deserve your peak hours. Within 2 weeks, expect performance gains, 20 to 30% more deep work minutes, fewer afternoon slumps, a steadier mood curve, and clearer win conditions for your priority projects. You won't feel like a different person. You'll feel like yourself, but with the static turned down and the signal turned up. The compounding path. Stick with it, and the returns accelerate. Within 3 to 6 months, you'll see 2 to 3 times more meaningful output with the same or fewer hours. The quality of your shipped work will noticeably improve because you're doing it in your peaks, not your troughs. And you'll execute under pressure with a calm that surprises you because you're not running on fumes and adrenaline anymore. The real shift is identity. You move from I need to try harder to I am energy-led. Systems run your day. Willpower becomes backup fuel, not your primary engine. Consistency builds your reputation, and reputation builds opportunity. And here's the kicker. Each win requires less effort than the last because your processes compound. The flywheel spins faster with the same push. The path and the order. This system has 8 steps, and the sequence matters. You'll diagnose your current state, map inputs, leaks, and task demand so you know what you're working with. Then you'll protect your prime hours and publish boundaries so people know when you're available and when you're not. Next, you'll charge strategically, match rest to fatigue type, and build a restoration stack that actually works. From there, you'll sharpen focus by eliminating switching and defining clear win conditions for every block. You'll reduce costs by friction mapping your workflow and designing micro-transitions that make starting cheap. Then you'll systematize with entropy resets and a second brain to externalize memory. You'll learn to forecast by planning around your peaks and applying a commitment gate to filter requests. Finally, you'll recalibrate weekly with a keep, tweak, cut loop that amplifies what works and prunes what doesn't. Why this order? Because you can't fill a leaking bucket. If you pour in recovery before you stop the drains, you're wasting the charge. If you try to forecast peaks before you have stable baselines, your predictions will be garbage. The sequence is designed to lock in gains at each stage, so the next stage builds on solid ground. Winners versus losers. Winners measure watts, not hours. They protect prime hours with unapologetic boundaries and ship good enough on time, then iterate. They know that done and learning beats perfect and late every single time. Losers chase urgency and wear busyness as a badge. They multitask, overcommit, and leak energy into 1,000 small fires. They delay shipping in pursuit of perfection, and their reputation becomes talented but unreliable. You get to choose which game you're playing. The tools are the same. The difference is the frame. What comes next isn't theory for theory's sake. In the energy equation, you'll learn to see your day as a battery with 3 levers and discover exactly how to stop gambling on motivation and start planning with power. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Energy Equation. You've been treating your workday like a to-do list when you should be treating it like a power grid. Every task you touch draws current. Every interruption creates a short circuit. And somewhere between your first coffee and your last email, the lights dim and you're running on backup generators, wondering why everything feels so hard. The problem isn't that you're lazy or undisciplined. The problem is you're flying blind. You can't see your charge level, you don't know what each task actually costs, and you're routing heavy draw work through low-voltage windows. It's like trying to run a data center on a car battery, technically possible for about 90 seconds before everything crashes. This chapter gives you the instrument panel you've been missing. You'll learn to read your wattage in real time, price your tasks accurately, and route work to the right windows. The goal isn't perfection, it's prediction. Know when you can push and when you need to glide, so you stop burning peak power on admin and save it for the work that actually moves the needle. Why most energy management fails. Here's what happens when you ignore the math. You wake up Monday with decent charge, attack your inbox for 2 hours, take 3 meetings, and by lunch you're cooked. So you push through the afternoon on willpower and caffeine, produce mediocre work, crash at 8, and repeat the cycle Tuesday. By Thursday, you're running on fumes. By Friday, you're counting hours until the weekend. This is the heroic sprint and crash pattern, and it's expensive. You're not just tired, you're accumulating cognitive debt that degrades every decision you make. Small choices take longer. Errors slip through. Your mood swings because your nervous system is stuck in overdrive with no recovery protocol. The alternative isn't working less. It's working smarter by converting vague "I'm tired" into measurable levers you can actually adjust. When you can see the equation, what's charging you, what's draining you, and what you're producing, you stop guessing and start planning. That shift alone eliminates the boom-bust cycle and replaces it with consistent throughput you can count on. The battery model, 3 levers you control. Think of your day as a battery with 3 components: inputs, leaks, and outputs. Inputs are what charge you: quality rest, light exposure, movement, and deliberate stillness. Leaks are what drain you invisibly: interruptions, rumination, perfectionism loops, and context switching. Outputs are what you deliberately create when you're charged: deep work blocks, high-impact tasks, and shipped projects. Most people obsess over outputs and ignore the other 2. They try to force more production without asking whether the battery is charged or whether it's leaking faster than it fills. That's why effort feels enormous, but results stay flat. You're pouring energy into a system that's hemorrhaging watts through a dozen invisible holes. The equation is simple. Your usable energy equals inputs minus leaks. What's left determines your output capacity. If your inputs are weak and your leaks are high, you're operating in a deficit before you even start. No amount of discipline fixes that. You need to either boost the charge or plug the drains, preferably both. Here's the shift. Stop thinking in hours and start thinking in watts. A 60-minute meeting costs different amounts of energy depending on when it happens and what it requires. A strategy session at 9 a.m. when you're fresh might cost you 30 watts. The same meeting at 3 p.m. when you're depleted might cost you 80. Same duration, wildly different price. If you're not tracking wattage, you're making expensive mistakes without knowing it. Pricing your tasks: heavy, medium, light. Not all work draws the same current. Writing a strategy document from scratch is heavy draw. It requires deep focus, creative synthesis, and sustained attention. Answering routine emails is light draw. It's mostly pattern recognition and quick decisions. Reviewing a report falls somewhere in the middle. The mistake most people make is treating all tasks as equal and stacking them randomly throughout the day. Heavy tasks land in low-watt windows. Light tasks consume peak hours. The result is mismatched demand and supply. You're trying to run high-draw work on low voltage, and it either stalls or produces garbage output. Start labeling your tasks by energy demand. Heavy tasks are anything that requires original thinking, complex problem-solving, or sustained creative effort. Medium tasks need moderate focus but follow established patterns: editing, planning, structured analysis. Light tasks are administrative, repetitive, or purely reactive: inbox triage, scheduling, quick approvals. Once you've labeled them, the routing rule is obvious: heavy tasks only in peak blocks, medium tasks in mid-range windows, light tasks in troughs and transitions. This isn't about working harder. It's about working with your natural rhythms instead of against them. When you match task demand to personal wattage, the same effort produces better results because you're not fighting friction the entire time. Mapping your power curve. Your energy isn't flat across the day. You have natural peaks and valleys shaped by your biology, your habits, and your environment. Most people have 3 to 5 high-watt blocks scattered through the day, typically mid-morning, late morning, and sometimes early evening. The rest of the day operates at lower voltage. Here's the exercise. Track your energy for 3 days. Every 2 hours, rate your mental clarity and focus on a simple scale: high, medium, or low. Don't overthink it. Just notice when you feel sharp and when you feel foggy. After 3 days, you'll see a pattern. Those high-clarity windows are your peaks. Those are the blocks you protect, like your career depends on it, because it does. Tag your low-watt windows too. These are perfect for admin, errands, and anything that doesn't require deep thought. Inbox 0 happens at 2 p.m., not 9 a.m. Expense reports happen in the trough, not the surge. When you stop wasting peaks on trivial work, you free up capacity for the tasks that actually build your reputation. Name your peak window. Call it your power window or prime block, or whatever makes it feel non-negotiable. The label matters because it creates a mental boundary. When someone asks for a meeting during your 8 to 11 power window, you don't negotiate. You offer an alternative time or you decline. Protecting this window is the single highest leverage move you can make. The one-page snapshot. You need a simple way to see the equation at a glance. Grab a single sheet of paper or open a blank doc. At the top, write today's date. Then create 3 sections: inputs, leaks, outputs. Under inputs, note the basics. Sleep quality on a 3-point scale, whether you got light exposure in the first hour after waking, whether you moved your body, and whether you built in any deliberate stillness. You're not tracking macros or logging minutes. You're just creating a rough proxy for charge level. Under leaks, list the drains you noticed. How many interruptions hit your deep blocks, whether you got stuck in a rumination loop, whether perfectionism inflated a task beyond its value. Again, keep it simple. You're looking for patterns, not precision. Under outputs, record what you actually shipped, how many deep blocks you completed, which high-impact tasks you finished, and whether you hit your win conditions for the day. This is your scoreboard. It tells you whether the equation is working or whether you need to adjust the levers. Do this for a week, and you'll see exactly where the system is breaking down. Maybe your inputs are solid, but your leaks are killing you. Maybe you're protecting focus, but routing the wrong tasks to your peaks. The snapshot makes the invisible visible, and once you can see it, you can fix it. The 90-second pre-commit review. Before you start any task, pause for 90 seconds and ask 3 questions. First, is this the right task for my current wattage? If you're in a peak and the task is light draw, defer it. If you're in a trough and the task is heavy draw, reschedule it or break it into smaller pieces. Second, what's the win condition for this block? Define done before you start. Not work on the report that's vague and infinite. Instead, draft the executive summary and outline 3 key recommendations: specific, bounded, achievable. When you hit that condition, you stop. No gold plating, no scope creep. Third, what leak do I need to plug first? Maybe it's closing Slack. Maybe it's silencing your phone. Maybe it's setting a timer to prevent a perfectionism spiral. Identify the most likely drain and eliminate it before it costs you watts. This review takes 90 seconds, but it saves you hours of wasted effort. It's a forcing function that aligns task, wattage, and environment before you commit. Most people skip this step and pay for it later when they're 30 minutes into the wrong work at the wrong time with the wrong setup. The predictable gains. When you start running the equation, the results compound fast. In the first 2 weeks, expect 10 to 15% more deep work minutes and fewer context switches. You'll notice the difference. Tasks that used to take 2 hours now take 90 minutes because you're doing them in the right window with the right charge. Push it further, and you'll see 25 to 35% throughput gains within a month. Your mood curve steadies because you're not riding the sprint crash roller coaster anymore. You finish days with energy left over instead of scraping the bottom of the tank. At the high end, you're looking at 2 times more meaningful output with predictable, calm execution. The work doesn't feel harder. It feels easier because you've eliminated the friction. You're not fighting your biology or your environment. You're working with both, and the compounding effect is undeniable. When the equation breaks, 3 failure modes show up repeatedly. First, you overestimate your capacity and stack too many heavy tasks in one day. The fix is simple. Halve your heavy task count and add buffers between blocks. You're not a machine. You need transition time. Second, you ignore leaks and wonder why your inputs aren't translating into outputs. Start a daily leak log. Write down every drain you notice, then kill 1 per week. Small, consistent leak elimination adds up faster than you think. Third, your peak windows get invaded by meetings, interruptions, and urgent requests. The fix is publishing your corridor times and enforcing office hours. Make it clear when you're available and when you're not. Most people will respect the boundary once you set it. The ones who don't are showing you exactly where your next no needs to land. The equation isn't fragile, it's forgiving. You don't need perfect inputs or 0 leaks to see results. You just need to move the levers in the right direction and track whether it's working. Adjust weekly, and the system self-corrects. But knowing your wattage is only half the battle. The other half is learning how to recharge deliberately, and that's where most high performers leave money on the table. Chapter 3, Charge Cycles. You just finished a 90-minute deep work block. Your brain feels like it's been running uphill. Your eyes are dry, your shoulders are tight, and instead of taking a real break, you switch to email for a quick check that turns into 40 minutes of reactive work. By the time you surface, you're more depleted than when you started, and your next block feels impossible before you even begin. This is where most people sabotage themselves. They know how to spend energy, but they have no idea how to restore it. They treat rest like a luxury they'll get to later, on weekends, on vacation, someday when the pressure eases. Meanwhile, they're running a deficit that compounds daily, and every task costs more than it should because they're operating on a depleted system. Here's the truth most productivity advice won't tell you. Recovery isn't the opposite of work. It's the foundation of work. Without deliberate recharge protocols, your capacity shrinks, your quality drops, and your consistency disappears. This chapter teaches you to build charge cycles that fit your rhythms so you can sustain high output for months without crashing. Why recovery is your secret weapon. When you skip recovery, you don't just feel tired. You accumulate what researchers call allostatic load, the wear and tear on your system from chronic stress. Every task you perform in a depleted state costs more energy than it would if you were fresh. Decision-making slows. Error rates climb. Creative insights vanish. You're not just working harder for the same results. You're working harder for worse results. The performance cliff shows up suddenly. You're fine on Monday, pushing through on Tuesday, dragging on Wednesday, and by Thursday afternoon, you can barely string together a coherent sentence. That's not a character flaw. That's biology. Your nervous system has been running in overdrive without a reset, and it's forcing a shutdown whether you like it or not. The alternative is simple, but requires a mindset shift. Treat rest as a performance multiplier you deploy with precision. Just like you wouldn't run a car engine at redline for 8 hours straight, you can't run your brain at peak intensity without planned downtime. The goal isn't to work less. It's to extend high-quality focus across the entire day by building in strategic recovery points. When you get this right, you prevent fatigue hangovers that bleed into the next day. You maintain an even energy curve instead of riding the boom-bust roller coaster, and you enable a sustainable pace over months, not just weeks. That consistency is what separates people who ship reliably from people who flame out spectacularly. The 3 phases of fatigue. Not all tiredness is the same, and that's where most recovery strategies fail. You finish a cognitively demanding task and reach for your phone, scrolling mindlessly through feeds. But if your fatigue is mental fog from sustained focus, screen time doesn't restore you. It just shifts the load to a different part of your brain that's already overworked. Mental fatigue shows up as brain fog, slow thinking, and difficulty holding complex ideas in your head. You've burned through your cognitive fuel, and your processing speed has dropped. What you need is eyes-off time, complete visual rest, ideally in silence or with minimal sensory input. Close your eyes for 2 minutes. Stare out a window at something distant. Let your mind idle without feeding it new information. Emotional fatigue is different. It comes from interpersonal stress, conflict, or sustained emotional regulation. Keeping your cool in a tense meeting, managing a difficult conversation, suppressing frustration when things go wrong. This type of depletion shows up as irritability, impatience, or a short fuse. The fix isn't silence. It's a brief social uplift or a moment of lightness, a quick chat with someone you trust, a few minutes of music that shifts your mood, or even stepping outside to change your emotional context. Sensory fatigue hits when you've been staring at screens too long or sitting in the same position for hours. Your eyes strain, your body feels restless, your attention scatters because your nervous system is screaming for variety. The solution is movement and environmental change. A short walk, stretching, or simply standing and looking at something other than a glowing rectangle. The key insight is this: match your rest to your fatigue type. When you do, recovery happens fast. When you don't, you waste your break on the wrong intervention and wonder why you still feel drained. The push-release-recover rhythm. Your brain operates in natural cycles, typically 50 to 90 minutes of high-quality focus, followed by a need for recovery. These are called ultradian rhythms, and they're hardwired into your biology. When you ignore them and push through for hours without a break, you're not being productive. You're degrading the quality of every minute past your natural peak. Here's the protocol that works. 50 minutes of focused work, 10 minutes of deliberate rest, repeat twice. After 2 cycles, take a longer reset, 15 to 20 minutes where you completely disengage. This rhythm keeps you near your cognitive peak throughout the day instead of burning bright for 90 minutes and then limping through the next 3 hours. Before each work block, write a 1-line win condition. Not a vague intention like make progress on the proposal, but a specific, bounded outcome. Draft the problem statement and outline 3 solution options. This gives your brain a clear target and prevents scope creep. When you hit the condition, you stop. The block is over. You take your 10-minute break whether you feel like it or not. The breaks aren't optional. They're part of the system. Pre-schedule them on your calendar like you would a meeting. When the timer goes off, you step away. No, just one more thing. No, I'm on a roll. The roll you're on is burning through reserves you'll need later, and the cost shows up in your next block when you can't focus and don't know why. During the 10-minute break, apply the fatigue matching rule. If your head feels foggy, close your eyes and breathe. If you're restless, move. If you're emotionally flat, step outside or listen to something that lifts you. The break isn't about killing time, it's about restoring the specific subsystem you just depleted. Building your restoration stack. You need a personalized menu of recovery tools you can deploy quickly. Think of it as a restoration stack, a short list of interventions that recharge you fast when you're running low. The stack should include at least 3 options so you can match the tool to the fatigue type. Light and air exposure is foundational. If you've been indoors under artificial light for hours, stepping outside for even 3 minutes resets your nervous system. Natural light recalibrates your circadian rhythm, and fresh air shifts your physiological state. This isn't woo, it's basic biology. Your body responds to environmental cues, and a brief dose of daylight can pull you out of a slump faster than another cup of coffee. Gentle movement works when you're physically stiff or mentally stuck. You don't need a workout, just a short walk, some stretching, or even standing and shifting your weight. Movement increases blood flow, clears metabolic waste from your brain, and gives your mind permission to wander. Some of your best insights will arrive during these movement breaks because you've stopped forcing and started allowing. Stillness practice is the opposite move, and it's just as powerful. Sit quietly for 2 minutes with your eyes closed. Focus on your breath, or simply notice the silence. This isn't meditation in the formal sense. It's a deliberate pause that interrupts the mental chatter and gives your nervous system a chance to downregulate. If your mind is racing from back-to-back decisions, stillness is the reset you need. Micro naps or sensory downshifts are advanced tools for when you're truly depleted. A 10-minute nap can restore alertness without leaving you groggy, but only if you keep it short. Set a timer, close your eyes, and let yourself drift. If sleep doesn't come, just resting with your eyes closed still provides recovery. Alternatively, dim the lights, reduce noise, and give your senses a break from constant stimulation. The trick is knowing which tool to reach for. After each work block, do a quick self-scan. Ask yourself, is my head foggy? Am I irritable? Are my eyes strained? Or am I restless? The answer tells you which intervention to deploy. Over time, this becomes automatic. You'll instinctively know what type of rest you need without having to think about it. The keystone rep, your non-negotiable anchor. Amid all the variables, you need one constant, a single daily recovery action you perform no matter what. This is your keystone rep, and it's scheduled like a meeting, non-negotiable. Even on your busiest, most chaotic days, this one thing happens. It could be a 10-minute walk at the same time every day. It could be 5 minutes of stillness before your first deep block. It could be stepping outside for light exposure within an hour of waking. The specific action matters less than the consistency. You're building a habit that anchors your recovery protocol and prevents you from skipping rest entirely when pressure mounts. The keystone rep also serves as a forcing function. When you protect this one recovery action, it reminds you that rest isn't optional. It's strategic. It's the difference between sustainable high performance and a spectacular burnout 3 months from now. Treat it with the same seriousness you'd treat a client meeting or a project deadline, because the long-term cost of skipping it is higher than you think. The predictable gains. When you install charge cycles, the results show up fast. In the first week, you'll notice fewer afternoon slumps. Your attention stays cleaner at the end of the day instead of dissolving into scattered, low-quality work. You finish feeling tired but not destroyed, and the next morning you wake with more capacity than you had before. Push it further, and you'll see an even energy curve across the day. Instead of one strong block followed by diminishing returns, you'll get 2 or 3 reliable, deep blocks with consistent quality. Your mood stabilizes because you're not riding the adrenaline crash cycle anymore. You're working with your biology instead of against it. At the high end, you're looking at months of high output with minimal fatigue and stable mood. The work doesn't feel like a grind because you're recovering in real time instead of accumulating debt. Your reputation shifts from talented but inconsistent to reliably excellent. And that shift opens doors you didn't even know were closed. When recovery fails, 3 failure modes show up repeatedly. First, you mistake passive consumption for rest. Scrolling social media or watching random videos feels like a break, but it's not restoring your depleted systems. It's just shifting the load. If you're mentally fatigued, screens make it worse. Replace doom scrolling with eyes closed breathing or a short walk, and you'll feel the difference immediately. Second, you skip recovery when deadlines loom, thinking you'll make up for it later. You won't. The deficit compounds, and by the time you try to recover, you're so far in the hole that a weekend isn't enough. The fix is pre-committing your breaks as calendar holds. When the block ends, you step away. No exceptions. The urgency will still be there in 10 minutes, but you'll handle it better with a clear head. Third, you use a one-size-fits-all approach to rest and wonder why it doesn't work. Keep a menu of at least 3 rest types and choose based on your fatigue tag. Mental fog gets eyes off time. Irritability gets a mood shift. Restlessness gets movement. Match the tool to the need, and recovery happens in minutes instead of hours. But even perfect recovery won't save you if your attention is scattered across a dozen open loops. And that's the invisible tax most people never see coming. Chapter 4. Focus Reservoir. You sit down to write. The document is open. Your coffee is fresh. You know exactly what needs to happen. But before you type the first sentence, you check Slack, then email, then that browser tab you left open yesterday. 15 minutes evaporate, and when you finally return to the blank page, your mind feels like it's wading through mud. The sharpness you had is gone, replaced by a vague sense of effort without traction. This isn't a discipline problem. It's a design problem. Your attention is a finite reservoir, not an infinite stream. Every time you switch contexts, even for 30 seconds, you're draining that reservoir and leaving cognitive residue that degrades everything you do next. Most people treat focus like it's abundant and renewable, so they leak it carelessly throughout the day. Then they wonder why their best ideas never arrive, and their deep work feels like pushing a boulder uphill. This chapter teaches you to protect your reservoir like the scarce resource it is. You'll build time sanctuaries where high-watt work happens by default. Automate boundaries so you stop negotiating every interruption and turn scattered intent into reliable throughput. Less apology, more protection. Fewer tabs, more results. The invisible tax on every switch. Here's what most people don't realize. Multitasking is a myth. Your brain doesn't run parallel processes. It toggles rapidly between tasks, and every toggle has a cost. When you jump from writing to email to Slack and back to writing, you're not being efficient. You're paying a switching tax that shows up as slower thinking, more errors, and a creeping sense of mental exhaustion that has no obvious cause. The research calls this attention residue. When you shift from task A to task B, part of your cognitive capacity stays stuck on task A. You're not fully present in the new task because your brain is still processing the old one. The effect compounds with every switch, so by the time you've toggled 5 or 6 times in an hour, you're operating at a fraction of your actual capacity. The cost isn't just speed, it's quality. Complex thinking requires sustained attention. When you fragment your focus, you lose access to the deeper layers of insight that only emerge after you've been immersed in a problem for 20 or 30 uninterrupted minutes. You're skimming the surface of every task instead of penetrating any of them, and the work you produce reflects that shallowness. Focus is the nozzle that turns stored energy into cutting power. You can have a fully charged battery, but if your attention is scattered across a dozen open loops, that energy dissipates into heat instead of concentrated force. Protecting your focus isn't about working harder, it's about channeling the energy you already have into the work that actually matters. Building your quiet corridors. The solution starts with creating protected time blocks where deep work happens by default. These are your quiet corridors, 60 to 120 minutes of uninterrupted focus scheduled at your identified peak windows. No meetings, no messages, no exceptions. During these blocks, you're unreachable, and that's not a bug, it's the entire point. Most people resist this because they've been conditioned to believe that availability equals professionalism. It doesn't. Availability equals responsiveness, which is useful for certain types of work, but deadly for creation. If you're always accessible, you're never deep. And if you're never deep, you're not producing the work that builds your reputation and advances your career. Start by installing 2 quiet corridors per day, scheduled at your natural peaks. If your energy map from the energy equation chapter shows high wattage from 8 to 11 in the morning, that's corridor 1. If you have another surge from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, that's corridor 2. Block them on your calendar like you would a client meeting, and treat them with the same level of commitment. The 1 in, 1 out rule is critical. No new commitments enter these blocks. If someone asks for a meeting during your quiet corridor, you offer an alternative time. If an urgent request lands in your inbox, it waits until the block ends. The only exception is a genuine emergency, and genuine emergencies are far rarer than most people think. This isn't about being difficult or uncooperative. It's about recognizing that your deep work is what creates the most value for everyone around you. When you protect your focus, you ship better work faster, which serves your team, your clients, and your own long-term trajectory. The people who matter will understand. The people who don't aren't paying attention to your results anyway. Batching communication to reclaim hours. One of the biggest focus killers is reactive communication, checking messages as they arrive and responding immediately. It feels productive because you're staying on top of things, but you're actually fragmenting your attention into worthless shards. Every notification is a context switch, and every switch drains your reservoir. The fix is batching. Instead of checking email and Slack continuously, create specific windows for communication, say 10 to 10:30 in the morning, noon to 12:30, and 4 to 4:30 in the afternoon. Outside those windows, the apps are closed. Notifications are off. You're unreachable, and that's exactly how it should be. Set expectations with an autoresponder or shared team norms. Let people know you check messages at specific times and will respond within those windows. Most requests aren't as urgent as they feel in the moment, and the ones that truly need immediate attention are rare enough that you can handle them without living in your inbox. This single change can reclaim 2 to 3 hours of deep work per day. You're not working more. You're working with your attention intact instead of shredded. The quality of your output jumps because you're finally giving your brain the sustained focus it needs to do complex thinking. The pre-block intent script. Before you start a quiet corridor, take 60 seconds to write a 10-word win condition. Not a vague goal like work on the proposal, but a specific, bounded outcome. Draft introduction and outline 3 main arguments. This clarity does 2 things. First, it gives your brain a clear target, which reduces decision fatigue during the block. Second, it prevents scope creep. When you hit the condition, you stop, even if you feel like you could keep going. The win condition also serves as a checkpoint at the end of the block. Did you hit it? If yes, the block was successful. If no, why not? Maybe the task was bigger than you thought, or maybe you got derailed by an interruption. Either way, you have data to adjust for next time. Keep a parking lot note open during the block, a simple text file or sheet of paper where you capture intrusive thoughts. When your brain says, "Don't forget to email Sarah," you write it down and return to the task. When you think, "I should check if that report came in," you write it down and keep moving. The parking lot traps distractions so they don't derail you, and you review it at the end of the block to handle anything that actually matters. This protocol turns scattered intent into focused execution. You're not relying on willpower to ignore distractions. You're designing an environment where distractions have nowhere to land. The difference is night and day. Making focus the default path. Willpower is expensive and unreliable. The smarter move is to shape your environment so the productive action is the easiest action. Physical markers help. A door sign that says "Deep Work in Progress," a desk flag you raise during quiet corridors, or even headphones that signal you're unavailable. These cues set expectations for others and remind you to stay on task. Your digital environment matters just as much. Create a single tasking browser profile with minimal tabs and only the tools you need for the current block. Close everything else. If you're writing, the only tab open is your document. If you're analyzing data, The only tab is your spreadsheet. Every additional tab is a potential context switch waiting to happen, and each switch costs you watts you can't afford to lose. At the end of each block, run a quick checkpoint. Did you hit your win condition? If yes, note what worked so you can repeat it. If no, identify the friction point. Was it an external interruption, a self-interrupt, or a task that was bigger than expected? Adjust for next time. This feedback loop turns your quiet corridors into a system that improves with every iteration. The gains you'll see. When you start protecting your focus, the results compound fast. In the first week, expect one solid deep block per day without interruptions. That alone will produce more meaningful output than a full day of fragmented work. You'll notice the difference. Tasks that used to take 3 hours now take 90 minutes because you're not constantly restarting. Push it further, and you'll get 2 to 3 deep blocks daily with clean edges. Your throughput jumps by 25 to 35%, not because you're working more hours, but because you're working with your attention intact. The quality of your work improves visibly because you're finally accessing the deeper layers of thinking that only emerge during sustained focus. At the high end, you're looking at 3 or more hours of uninterrupted creation daily. Your reputation shifts from busy to reliably excellent because you're shipping high-quality work on predictable timelines. People start coming to you for the hard problems because they know you have the focus to solve them. That's not luck. It's the direct result of protecting your reservoir. When boundaries break down, 3 failure modes show up repeatedly. First, your team interrupts your quiet corridors because they don't know the blocks exist. The fix is publishing your corridor times and offering office hours, specific windows when you're available for questions and collaboration. Most people will respect the boundary once you make it visible. Second, you interrupt yourself. A thought pops up, and instead of capturing it in the parking lot, you act on it immediately. The fix is discipline around the capture protocol. Write it down, schedule a review at block end, and return to the task. Every self-interrupt is a choice, and you can choose differently. Third, you feel guilty about protecting your focus because you've internalized the idea that availability equals value. Reframe it. Protecting your focus serves the team's outcomes. When you deliver high-quality work on time, everyone benefits. When you're constantly available but never deep, you're responsive but not productive. The former builds careers, the latter builds resentment. If boundary guilt persists, ask yourself, would you rather be known for answering Slack messages instantly or for shipping work that moves the needle? The answer clarifies the choice. The reservoir metaphor. Think of your attention as a reservoir with a fixed capacity. Every context switch drains it. Every interruption drains it. Every open loop drains it. When the reservoir runs dry, you can still go through the motions, but the quality of your thinking collapses. You're running on fumes, and the work you produce reflects that depletion. The goal isn't to never drain the reservoir. It's to manage the draw so you're always operating with enough capacity to do your best work. Quiet corridors protect the reservoir by eliminating unnecessary drains. Communication batching reduces the frequency of switches. The parking lot captures intrusions without letting them derail you. Together, these tools turn focus from a willpower battle into an environmental win. When your reservoir is full and your environment is designed to protect it, focus becomes effortless. You sit down, the work flows, and the hours disappear because you're finally operating the way your brain was designed to work, deeply, sustainably, and with the kind of clarity that produces results you're proud to ship. But even perfect focus won't save you if you're spending it on the wrong things, or worse, burning it in loops that produce nothing but anxiety. Chapter 5. Drain Control. You've been staring at the same paragraph for 20 minutes. It's almost good, maybe good enough. But what if it's not? What if you missed something obvious? What if someone reads it and thinks you're careless? So you rewrite it, then you rewrite it again. The clock ticks, your energy drains, and the paragraph, objectively fine 15 minutes ago, is now worse because you've overthought it into oblivion. This is the invisible tax most people never see. You think you're working hard, but you're actually burning watts in loops that produce nothing. Rumination masquerading as analysis. Perfectionism disguised as quality control. Stress spirals that feel productive but yield zero forward motion. These drains don't announce themselves. They whisper that they're helping while they quietly bleed you dry. Here's the truth. You can't outrun a hole in the bucket. All the charge cycles and focus protocols in the world won't save you if you're leaking energy faster than you're restoring it. This chapter teaches you to identify the drains, shut them down fast, and redirect that energy into movement. Less angst, more output. Less worship of perfect, more reward for shipped. The drains that feel like work. The most dangerous energy leaks are the ones that disguise themselves as effort. You sit at your desk for 3 hours, and at the end, you're exhausted, but you haven't actually moved the work forward. What happened? You got stuck in a drain that felt like productivity, but was really just cognitive spinning. Rumination is the classic example. You replay a conversation, analyze what you should have said, imagine how it might have gone differently. It feels like problem solving, but it's not. You're not generating new information or testing solutions. You're just running the same mental tape on repeat, burning energy without producing insight. The fatigue is real, but it's false fatigue. You're not tired from doing hard work. You're tired from being stuck. Perfectionism is another high-cost drain. You tell yourself you're pursuing excellence, but what you're really doing is avoiding the discomfort of shipping something that might be criticized. So you add another revision. You tweak the formatting. You second-guess the structure. Each pass costs energy, and each pass yields diminishing returns. By the time you finally ship, you've spent 3 times the necessary effort and produced work that's marginally better, if it's better at all. Ego defense is subtler, but just as expensive. You avoid starting a difficult task because failure would sting. You procrastinate on the high-stakes project because if you don't try, you can't fail. You busy yourself with low-value work that feels safe, all while the important task sits untouched. The avoidance burns energy through stress and guilt, and the work still doesn't get done. You're paying twice, once in wasted watts, once in missed progress. These drains create a vicious cycle. You burn energy without moving forward, which makes you feel depleted, which makes the next task feel harder, which increases avoidance, which burns more energy. The spiral tightens until you're exhausted and stuck, wondering why you can't seem to get traction despite working all day. The lies you tell yourself. Most people defend their drains with stories that sound reasonable but don't hold up under scrutiny. Stress proves I care is a common one. You equate anxiety with commitment, as if worrying harder will somehow improve the outcome. It won't. Stress is a signal, not a strategy. It tells you something needs attention, but ruminating on it doesn't solve the problem. Action does. Another myth. I need to feel ready before I start. You wait for clarity, for confidence, for the perfect moment when everything aligns. But readiness doesn't arrive on its own. It emerges from movement. You don't think your way into action. You act your way into clarity. Waiting for the feeling wastes energy and delays progress. Starting before you're ready is how you get ready. The perfectionism myth is the most seductive. Perfection protects my reputation. You believe that if you just polish it one more time, you'll avoid criticism and cement your credibility. But perfection is a moving target. There's always one more thing to fix, one more edge to smooth. Meanwhile, the work sits unshipped, and your reputation suffers not from imperfection, but from inconsistency. People remember who delivers, not who agonizes. These myths feel true because they're wrapped in good intentions. You care about quality. You want to do your best. But caring doesn't require suffering, and doing your best doesn't mean doing everything. The goal is to ship work that's good enough to be useful and get better through iteration, not to chase an impossible standard that keeps you stuck. Name act, the 3-step kill switch. When you catch yourself in a drain, you need a fast protocol to break the loop. Name, aim, act is that protocol. It takes less than 2 minutes and converts stuck energy into forward motion. First, Name the drain precisely. Don't just say, I'm stressed. Say, I'm in a perfection spiral, or I'm ruminating on yesterday's meeting, or I'm avoiding this task because I'm afraid it won't be good enough. The specificity matters because naming a thought reduces its control. When you label what's happening, you create distance between yourself and the loop. You're no longer inside it, you're observing it, which gives you the leverage to step out. Second, aim by defining the smallest next move that advances the work. Not the entire project, not the perfect solution, just the next 3-minute action. If you're stuck on a report, the aim might be write one sentence of the introduction. If you're avoiding a difficult conversation, the aim might be draft the opening line of the email. The move has to be small enough that it feels trivial, because trivial is what breaks inertia. Third, act. Set a timer for 3 minutes and start. Don't negotiate. Don't prep. Don't wait for the feeling. Just move. The 3-minute threshold is deliberate. It's short enough that resistance can't build, but long enough that momentum starts to carry you. Most of the time, you'll keep going past the timer because starting was the only real barrier. If you don't, that's fine. You've still made progress, and progress is the antidote to stuck. This protocol works because it exploits a simple truth. Mood follows movement, not the other way around. You don't need to feel motivated to start. You start, and motivation arrives as a byproduct of action. The energy you were burning in the loop gets redirected into the work, and the drain stops. Diffusing sticky thoughts in 60 seconds. Some thoughts grip harder than others. They loop in your head, demanding attention, insisting they're important. The more you try to ignore them, the louder they get. Fighting them directly burns energy and rarely works. The smarter move is cognitive diffusion, a quick trick that loosens the thought's hold without requiring you to believe or disbelieve it. Here's how it works. Take the sticky thought and say it out loud in a silly voice. If the thought is, "This report isn't good enough," say it like a cartoon character or in an exaggerated accent. The content stays the same, but the delivery changes, and that shift breaks the thought's grip. It sounds absurd, and that's the point. You're not trying to disprove the thought. You're reducing its emotional weight so it stops hijacking your attention. After the diffusion, follow with one line, noted, back to task. You're acknowledging the thought without letting it derail you. It showed up, you saw it, and now you're moving on. This takes 60 seconds, and it works because it interrupts the automatic response of taking every thought seriously. Not every thought deserves your energy. Most of them are just noise, and treating them as such frees you to focus on what actually matters. Setting ship criteria to kill perfectionism. Perfectionism thrives in ambiguity. When you don't define done, you can always find one more thing to fix. The solution is setting ship criteria before you start. A clear, predefined threshold that tells you when the work is good enough to release. Ship criteria are specific and bounded. For a client proposal, it might be includes problem statement, 3 solution options, and a timeline. For a presentation, it might be covers the key points with supporting data and fits within 20 minutes. The criteria capture what's necessary without demanding perfection. Once you hit them, you ship. No gold plating, no endless tweaking. The 2-iteration limit is a forcing function. You're allowed 2 passes at the work before you seek external feedback. The first pass gets it done, the second pass cleans it up. After that, you ship and learn from the response. This prevents the perfectionism spiral where you revise endlessly in isolation, guessing at what might be wrong instead of testing it in the real world. Predefining ship criteria also lowers the cost of failure. If the work meets the criteria and still gets criticized, you've learned something useful. If it doesn't meet the criteria, you know exactly what to fix. Either way, you're moving forward instead of stuck in your head, imagining problems that may not exist. Physical breaks to reset emotional loops. Sometimes the drain isn't cognitive, it's emotional. You're frustrated, anxious, or stuck in a low mood that's coloring everything you touch. When that happens, thinking your way out doesn't work. You need a physical pattern break to reset your nervous system. Stand up, take 10 deep breaths, walk to another room. The movement interrupts the emotional loop and gives your body a chance to downregulate. You're not trying to fix the emotion, you're just creating space between the feeling and your response to it. Most emotional spikes lose their intensity within 2 to 3 minutes if you don't feed them with rumination. Timer caps work for rumination too. If you catch yourself replaying a conversation or worrying about a future outcome, set a timer for 2 minutes. Let yourself think about it for that window, then move. The timer gives your brain permission to process without letting the loop run indefinitely. When the timer goes off, you shift to action, even if the action is just returning to the task at hand. The failure floor is your safety net on bad days. It's the minimum output you commit to shipping no matter how you feel. Maybe it's one paragraph, one email, one small task completed. The floor keeps you in motion even when everything feels hard, and motion is what prevents the drain from becoming a multi-day stall. The gains you'll see. When you start controlling drains, the results are immediate. In the first week, expect your rumination time to drop by half. You'll catch yourself in loops faster and break them before they consume an hour. Starting key tasks becomes easier because you're not waiting for readiness, you're just moving. Push it further, and you'll see daily progress on priority projects. The work that used to stall for days now advances in small, consistent increments. You'll notice a calm underload that wasn't there before, not because the pressure decreased, but because you're not amplifying it with internal loops. At the high end, you develop a consistent shipping cadence. You finish things on predictable timelines, and your reputation shifts from talented but erratic to reliably excellent. People start trusting you with bigger opportunities because they know you'll deliver. That trust compounds into career momentum you can't buy with raw talent alone. When drains creep back, 3 failure modes show up repeatedly. First, you relapse into loops despite knowing better. The fix is pairing the timer with a movement cue. When the 2 minutes are up, you stand and walk for 60 seconds before returning to the task. The physical shift reinforces the mental break. Second, perfection creeps back in. You hit your ship criteria, then decide just one more pass won't hurt. It does. The fix is rereading your ship criteria aloud before each revision. If you've met the threshold, you ship. No exceptions. Third, emotional spikes derail your blocks. A frustrating email arrives, and suddenly you're too agitated to focus. The fix is scheduling a 3-minute reset drill between tasks. Stand, breathe, clear the emotion before you start the next block. You're not suppressing the feeling, you're processing it quickly so it doesn't bleed into unrelated work. Drains are persistent, but they're also predictable. Once you know your patterns, you can intercept them early and redirect the energy before it's wasted. The goal isn't to eliminate drains entirely, it's to catch them fast and recover quickly. But even with perfect drain control, you'll still hit friction when you try to start, and that friction is costing you more than you think. Chapter 6, Action Cost. The task is on your list. You know it matters. You've blocked time for it. But when the moment arrives, you stare at the blank screen and feel a wall of resistance you can't explain. It's not that you don't want to do it. It's that starting feels impossibly heavy. So you check email instead, or reorganize your desk, or suddenly remember 3 other things that need attention right now. 30 minutes vanish, and the task sits untouched, mocking you. This isn't laziness, it's friction. Every task has an invisible price tag, the energy required to initiate it, and when that price is too high, your brain refuses to pay. You think you're procrastinating, but you're actually responding rationally to a poorly designed starting point. The task is vague, the context is missing, and the first step feels like climbing a mountain when all you needed was a curb. This chapter teaches you to make starting so cheap your future self can't refuse. You'll re-script tasks to eliminate ambiguity, arrange your environment to nudge action, and engineer small wins that snowball into momentum. You'll finish each day staged for tomorrow, so you wake into motion instead of negotiation. The hidden tax on every start. Most people underestimate how much energy it takes to begin. You think the hard part is doing the work, but the real cost is often the transition from idle to engaged. Your brain has to load context, suppress distractions, and overcome the inertia of rest. When the starting point is unclear or cluttered, that cost multiplies, and your brain starts looking for easier options. High action cost breeds avoidance. The task that should take an hour gets delayed for days because the first step feels too expensive. You tell yourself you'll do it when you have more energy, but more energy never arrives because you're burning it on avoidance and guilt. The delay compounds, the task grows in your mind, and the starting cost increases further. You're stuck in a loop where waiting makes starting harder, which makes you wait longer. The solution isn't more discipline, it's cheaper starts. When you lower the barrier to initiation, you multiply the number of times you actually begin across the week. Each start compounds into progress, and progress builds momentum. Suddenly, you're not fighting to get moving. You're riding the wave of small wins that carry you forward with less effort. Cheap starts also reduce the psychological weight of your to-do list. When every task has a clear, trivial first step, the list stops feeling overwhelming. You're not looking at finish the quarterly report. You're looking at open the template and write the first heading. One feels impossible. The other feels like 30 seconds of work. Same task, radically different starting cost. The myths that keep you stuck. The first myth is that big goals need big starts. You think meaningful work requires a grand gesture, clearing your calendar, finding the perfect environment, waiting for inspiration. But big starts are expensive, and expensive starts rarely happen. You're waiting for conditions that never align, and meanwhile the work sits undone. The truth is that big goals are built from trivial starts. You don't write a book by writing a book. You write a book by opening a document and typing one sentence. The sentence leads to a paragraph. The paragraph leads to a page. The momentum builds, but only if you make the first move cheap enough to execute without negotiation. The second myth is that if it isn't hard, it doesn't count. You've internalized the idea that struggle equals value, so you resist making things easy. But ease isn't the enemy of excellence, it's the enabler. When starting is effortless, you start more often. When you start more often, you finish more work. When you finish more work, the quality compounds because you're iterating instead of stalling. The third myth is that motivation must come first. You wait to feel inspired, energized, or ready before you begin. But motivation is a result of action, not a prerequisite. You don't think your way into doing, you do your way into thinking. The feeling you're waiting for arrives after you start, not before. Waiting for it is just another form of avoidance dressed up as preparation. These myths keep you stuck because they sound reasonable. They feel true, but they're costing you more than you realize, and the alternative is simpler than you think. The 3-minute opener. The fastest way to lower action cost is to rewrite every task as a 3-minute first move. Not the entire task, just the opener. The move has to be so small that it feels trivial, because trivial is what breaks resistance. Instead of draft the proposal, the opener is open the template and write the title. Instead of analyze the data, it's open the spreadsheet and label the first column. Instead of prepare for the meeting, it's list 3 key points on a blank page. Each opener is specific, bounded, and achievable in 3 minutes or less. The language matters. Use verbs only, no vague nouns. Work on the report is a noun phrase that gives your brain no traction. Write the executive summary is a verb phrase that tells you exactly what to do. Verbs create clarity. Nouns create confusion. When you're staring at a task and feeling resistance, check the language. If it's noun-heavy, rewrite it into verbs. The 3-minute threshold is deliberate. It's short enough that your brain can't build a case against starting. You don't need energy, focus, or inspiration to do 3 minutes of work. You just need to show up and move. Most of the time, you'll keep going past the 3 minutes because starting was the only real barrier. If you don't, that's fine. You've still made progress, and progress is the antidote to stuck. This protocol works because it exploits a principle from chemistry: lower the activation energy, accelerate the reaction. Every task has an energy barrier you have to cross to begin. When you shrink that barrier to 3 minutes, you remove the excuse. The task stops being a mountain and becomes a step. Steps are easy. Mountains are hard. Choose steps. Preloading context to eliminate cold starts. The second friction point is context loading. You sit down to work, but the file is buried in a folder, the links are scattered across old emails, and you can't remember where you left off. By the time you've gathered everything, you've burned 15 minutes and half your focus. The task hasn't even started, and you're already depleted. The fix is preloading context the day before. At the end of each work session, stage everything you'll need for tomorrow's first task. Open the file and leave the cursor where you'll type. Paste the relevant links into a single note. Write a one-line reminder of where you left off. When you sit down the next morning, everything is ready. You don't have to think, you just start. This is especially powerful for deep work blocks. Create a single-purpose desktop with only the tools you need for that block. If you're writing, the only thing open is your document. If you're analyzing, the only thing open is your spreadsheet. Every additional app or tab is a potential distraction and a source of friction. Remove them before you start, and you remove the temptation to switch. Preloading context also exploits state-dependent memory. When you recreate the same environmental cues, same file, same position, same setup, your brain re-enters the working state faster. You're not starting cold, you're resuming, and resuming is cheaper than starting from scratch. The 5-minute evening reset is your forcing function. Before you close your laptop, spend 5 minutes staging tomorrow's first click. Clear the clutter, open the right file, write the next step. This small investment saves you 20 minutes of friction the next morning, and it compounds daily. Over a week, you've reclaimed hours just by eliminating cold starts. Micro-transitions, sliding between tasks without friction. The third friction point is the gap between tasks. You finish one thing, and instead of moving cleanly to the next, you drift. You check your phone, you browse a tab, you lose momentum, and by the time you try to start the next task, you're starting cold again. Micro-transitions solve this. At the end of each block, you close the current loop and immediately name the next one. Then you take a 30-second action on the next task. Open the file, write the first line, set the stage. You're not doing the full task. You're just lowering the barrier so the next start is trivial. This protocol keeps you in motion. You're not stopping and restarting, you're transitioning. The momentum carries you from one task to the next with minimal friction. You finish the day having completed multiple blocks without the usual startup cost for each one. The end-of-block staging ritual is critical. Before you step away, write tomorrow's first click. If you're working on a report, the first click might be, open the document and read the last paragraph I wrote. If you're preparing a presentation, it might be, add the title slide and list 3 key points. The click has to be so small that future you can execute it without thinking. This ritual also prevents the Sunday night dread that comes from staring at a blank Monday. When you've staged your first clicks, Monday morning starts with motion instead of negotiation. You sit down, you click, you're working. No warm-up, no resistance, no wasted energy on decision-making. First 30-second scripts. Some tasks recur often enough that you can script the first 30 seconds. For writing, the script might be open document, read last sentence, write next sentence. For analysis, it might be open spreadsheet, scan last row, add new data point. For outreach, it might be open email template, insert name, write greeting. These scripts remove the need to decide how to start. You've already decided. You just execute the script and the task begins. Over time, the script becomes automatic. You don't think about starting, you just do it, and the work flows from there. The scripts also create consistency. When you start the same way every time, your brain recognizes the pattern and enters the working state faster. You're building a ritual that signals this is when we write, or this is when we analyze. The ritual lowers the activation energy and makes starting feel inevitable instead of optional. Keep your scripts visible. Write them on a card near your workstation or pin them to your desktop. When you sit down to work, you don't have to remember the script. You just read it and execute. The external cue removes the cognitive load and makes starting automatic. Removing wrong paths. Friction isn't just about what you add, it's also about what you remove. Every wrong path in your environment is a potential detour. The social media app that's one click away, the browser tab that pulls you into a rabbit hole, the cluttered desktop that scatters your attention before you even begin. The fix is environmental design. During your quiet corridors, hide the apps you don't need. Block the sites that distract you. Clear your desktop to a single file or folder. You're not relying on willpower to avoid distractions. You're removing the distractions so there's nothing to avoid. This is choice architecture in action. You're making the productive path the easiest path. When the only thing in front of you is the work, you do the work. When there are 10 other options competing for attention, you fragment. Design the environment so the right choice is the default choice, and you'll make it more often without effort. The verb-only checklist is another forcing function. Write your tasks as action verbs and keep the list visible. Draft introduction is clearer than introduction. Analyze data is clearer than data review. The verbs tell you exactly what to do, and clarity reduces friction. When you know the next move, you make it. When you're guessing, you stall. The gains you'll see. When you start lowering action cost, the results show up immediately. In the first week, expect 20 to 30% faster starts. Tasks that used to take 10 minutes of warm-up now begin in 30 seconds. You're not wasting energy on negotiation, you're spending it on execution. Push it further, and you'll build daily streaks on core tasks. The work that used to happen sporadically now happens consistently because starting is cheap and momentum is self-sustaining. Your startup anxiety drops because you're not facing a mountain every morning, you're facing a step. At the high end, initiation becomes automatic. You sit down, the work begins, and you don't even notice the transition. There's no pep talk, no negotiation, no resistance. You've designed the environment and the task structure so thoroughly that starting is the path of least resistance. You're not fighting yourself, you're flowing. When friction creeps back, 3 failure modes show up repeatedly. First, you over-design the system. You create elaborate staging rituals that take longer than the task itself. The fix is limiting yourself to 3 friction kills per task. Identify the 3 biggest barriers, remove them, and move on. Perfection isn't the goal. Progress is. Second, you backslide into clutter. Your desktop fills up, your files scatter, and suddenly you're back to cold starts. The fix is the evening 5-minute reset. Before you close your laptop, clear the clutter and stage tomorrow's first click. Make it non-negotiable and the system holds. Third, vague tasks creep back onto your list. You write, handle the project instead of draft the project outline, and the vagueness stalls you. The fix is immediate rewriting. The moment you notice a vague task, rewrite it into verb-led micro-steps. Don't wait. Don't let it sit. Fix it now, and you'll start later. Action cost is persistent, but it's also predictable. Once you know where the friction lives, you can eliminate it systematically. The goal isn't to remove all effort, it's to remove the wasted effort that keeps you from starting. When starting is cheap, finishing becomes inevitable. But cheap starts only matter if they're pointed at the right work, and that's where most people lose the game before they even begin. Chapter 7, Systems Build. You've had a great week. You protected your focus, controlled your drains, and lowered your action costs. You shipped more work than usual, and it felt good. Then Monday arrives, and somehow you're back to square one. The desk is cluttered. The files are scattered. You can't remember what you were working on or where you left off. The momentum you built last week evaporates in 15 minutes of searching for context you should have saved. This is the problem with relying on willpower and good intentions. They work until they don't. You have a strong day, then a weak day, and the weak day erases the gains from the strong one. You're not building, you're rebuilding, over and over because nothing sticks. The effort feels enormous, but the progress is fragile. Here's what changes the game: systems. Not motivation, not discipline, not trying harder, systems that run whether you feel like it or not. This chapter teaches you to build a living operating system that saves watts by default. Order shrinks decision friction. External memory holds the details. Weekly reviews amplify what works and kill what doesn't. The result is predictable momentum that compounds instead of resetting every Monday. Why habits beat heroics. The most productive people you know aren't grinding harder than everyone else. They've built systems that make the right actions automatic. They don't decide whether to start, they just start, because the environment and the process make starting the path of least resistance. The system runs the day. Willpower is backup fuel, not the primary engine. Systems outlast moods. On days when you're tired, distracted, or unmotivated, the system still works because it doesn't require you to feel a certain way. You follow the process, and the process produces results. Over time, those results compound. Small wins stack into bigger wins. The flywheel spins faster with the same push because the system is amplifying your effort instead of wasting it. Order lowers energy waste and decision fatigue. When everything has a place and every process has a script, you're not burning watts on where did I put that file or what should I do next. You know where things are. You know what comes next. The cognitive load drops and the energy you save gets redirected into the work that actually matters. The alternative is chaos tax, the invisible cost of disorder. Every misplaced file, every forgotten task, every decision you have to remake because you didn't capture it the first time, these are small leaks that add up to massive waste. You're not just losing time, you're losing energy, focus, and momentum. The chaos tax compounds daily, and most people never see it because it's spread across 100 tiny inefficiencies. The 3 lies that keep you disorganized. The first lie is, I'll remember it. You won't. Your brain isn't designed to hold dozens of open loops, pending decisions, and half-formed ideas. Every item you try to remember occupies working memory, and working memory is scarce. When you overload it, your thinking slows, your creativity drops, and you start forgetting the things you swore you'd never forget. The second lie is, creativity needs chaos. You've romanticized the messy desk and the scattered notes, believing that disorder is a sign of genius. It's not. Chaos creates friction, and friction kills momentum. The most creative people have systems that free their minds to wander, not systems that force their minds to track trivia. The third lie is, once is enough. You solve a problem, ship the work, and move on. But you don't capture how you solved it, so the next time the same problem appears, you're starting from scratch. You're not compounding your learning, you're repeating it. Every repeated solution is wasted energy you could have saved with a simple template or checklist. These lies feel true because they're wrapped in good intentions. You want to trust your memory. You want to believe that spontaneity fuels creativity. But the cost is higher than you think, and the alternative is simpler than you imagine. The 5-minute entropy reset. Entropy is the natural drift toward disorder. Leave your workspace alone for a day, and it starts to clutter. Leave it alone for a week, and it's chaos. The fix isn't a massive cleanup session once a month. It's a 5-minute daily reset that prevents the drift from accumulating. At the end of each day, clear your desk. Close open loops. Finish the task, defer it with a note, or delete it if it doesn't matter. File artifacts to standard places so you can find them tomorrow without searching. The goal isn't perfection, it's restoring enough order that tomorrow starts clean instead of cluttered. Rebuild a clean slate for tomorrow's peak block. Open the file you'll need. Stage the links, notes, and tools. Write a 1-line reminder of where you left off. When you sit down the next morning, everything is ready. You don't have to think, you just start. The 5-minute reset saves you 20 minutes of friction the next day, and it compounds weekly. This ritual also creates a psychological boundary between today and tomorrow. You're not carrying today's clutter into tomorrow's work. You're closing the loop, resetting the space, and giving yourself permission to start fresh. That boundary matters because it prevents the accumulation of cognitive debt that makes every day feel harder than the last. The entropy reset is non-negotiable. It's not something you do when you have time. It's something you do every day like brushing your teeth. The consistency is what makes it work. Miss a day, and the clutter starts. Miss a week, and you're back to chaos tax. Do it daily, and order becomes automatic. Building your second brain. Your brain is for thinking, not for storage. Every idea you try to hold, every task you try to remember, every decision you try to track, these occupy mental bandwidth you need for creative work. The solution is externalizing everything into a second brain, a simple, reliable system that holds the details so your mind can focus on the substance. The second brain has two components, a capture system and an action system. The capture system is one inbox where everything lands. Ideas, tasks, questions, links, notes. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's worth remembering, it goes in the inbox. The inbox is a holding pen, not a to-do list. You're not committing to action, you're just capturing so you don't lose it. The action system is where captured items become work. Once a day, you process the inbox. Each item gets tagged by energy demand, heavy, medium, or light, and by project. Then it moves to your action board, where you can see what needs doing and route it to the right window. The separation between capture and action is critical. It prevents the inbox from becoming a cluttered mess and keeps your action board focused on what's actually next. Tagging by energy demand aligns with the energy equation from Chapter 2. Heavy tasks go to peak windows, medium tasks go to mid-range windows, light tasks fill the troughs. You're not just listing work, you're routing it to the right time, which multiplies your throughput without adding hours. The second brain also prevents the "I forgot" problem. When everything is externalized, you're not relying on memory, you're relying on a system that doesn't forget. The cognitive load drops, and the energy you save gets redirected into thinking, creating, and shipping. The weekly compounding review. Daily resets prevent chaos. Weekly reviews amplify wins. At the end of each week, spend 20 minutes running a keep, tweak, cut review. This is where you look at what worked, what almost worked, and what's dead weight. Keep is for the wins. What created progress this week? What made starting easier, focus sharper, or shipping faster? Lock it in. Write it down. Make it part of next week's default process. The goal is to promote what works so it becomes automatic instead of accidental. Tweak is for the near misses. What almost worked but needs adjustment. Maybe your quiet corridors are the right length but scheduled at the wrong time. Maybe your ship criteria are too vague and need tightening. Tweak one thing per week, test it, and see if it improves. Small, repeated adjustments compound into massive gains over months. Cut is for the dead weight. What's on your list that doesn't matter? What process are you following out of habit instead of value? What commitment are you keeping because you said yes 6 months ago, even though it's not serving you now? Cut it ruthlessly. Every item you remove frees energy for the work that actually moves the needle. The review also updates your peak forecast for the next week. You're not just reacting to what happened, you're planning for what's next. You're routing heavy work to peaks, batching communication, and preloading context so Monday starts with momentum instead of negotiation. This weekly loop is a feedback mechanism. You're not guessing what works, you're testing, measuring, and adjusting based on evidence. Over time, the system self-optimizes. What started as a rough process becomes a finely tuned machine that produces consistent results with less effort. Automating the repetitive. Some tasks recur often enough that you can automate the setup. Standard file names make retrieval instant. Project templates eliminate the need to rebuild structure every time. Shortcuts and skeleton documents turn a 10-minute setup into a 10-second click. For writing, create a skeleton document with standard headings. For analysis, build a template spreadsheet with pre-formatted columns. For outreach, write email scripts with placeholders for names and details. You're not automating the thinking, you're automating the scaffolding so you can focus on the substance. Visual dashboards help you track what matters without drowning in data. Pick 3 metrics: deep blocks completed, high-impact items shipped, and leaks killed. Update them weekly. If the numbers are climbing, the system is working. If they're flat or dropping, something needs adjustment. The dashboard gives you a quick read on momentum without requiring complex analysis. The key is keeping automation lightweight. You're not building an elaborate system that takes more time to maintain than it saves. You're identifying the 3 biggest sources of repetitive friction and removing them. That's it. Simple, fast, and effective. The gains you'll see. When you install systems, the results show up in layers. In the first 2 weeks, you'll notice fewer lost ideas and smoother daily starts. The chaos tax drops because you're not searching for files or reconstructing context. You're starting clean, and clean starts compound into faster finishes. Push it further, and you'll see near zero setup time for recurring work. The tasks that used to take 20 minutes of prep now begin instantly because the template is ready, the files are staged, and the process is scripted. Your execution gets cleaner because you're not wasting energy on setup. You're spending it on substance. At the high end, effort drops while output climbs. You're doing less work to produce more results because the system is amplifying every action. The flywheel is spinning and the momentum is visible. You finish weeks with more shipped work and less fatigue because the system is carrying the load instead of your willpower. This is the compounding effect in action. Small, repeated improvements stack into exponential gains. You're not working harder, you're working smarter, and the difference shows up in your results, your reputation, and your energy levels. When systems break down, 3 failure modes show up repeatedly. First, tool sprawl. You add a new app for every problem, and suddenly you're managing 6 systems instead of 1. The fix is consolidation. Pick the fewest tools that cover your needs. 1 for capture, 1 for action, 1 for files. More tools don't mean more productivity. They mean more friction. Second, stale templates. You build a template, use it for months, and never update it. The template stops serving you and starts slowing you down. The fix is a quarterly refresh. Delete one template that's obsolete. Improve one that's almost right. Keep the system alive by evolving it with your work. Third, over-documenting. You capture everything in exhaustive detail, and the system becomes a burden instead of a tool. The fix is optimizing for speed to start, not completeness. Keep artifacts lightweight. Capture enough to restart the work, not enough to write a manual. The goal is action, not archives. Systems are living things. They need maintenance, but the maintenance should be light and fast. 5 minutes daily, 20 minutes weekly, and an hour quarterly. That's it. The return on that investment is massive, and it compounds every week you stick with it. But even the best system won't save you if you're pointing it at the wrong work. And that's where most people's calendars betray them. Chapter 8, Peak Forecast. Your calendar is full. Back-to-back meetings, standing syncs, quick check-ins that somehow take an hour. You're busy from the moment you sit down until the moment you close your laptop. But when someone asks what you accomplished this week, you struggle to name one meaningful thing you shipped. The hours were spent, the energy was burned, but the output doesn't match the effort. This is the trap of treating your calendar like a parking lot. First come, first served. No strategy, no filter. You say yes to everything because you think availability equals professionalism. But availability without discernment is just noise. You're giving your best hours to whoever asks first, and what's left over, the scraps of energy at the end of the day, goes to the work that actually matters. Here's the shift. Your calendar isn't a parking lot. It's a performance machine. And like any machine, it needs to be designed, not just filled. This chapter teaches you to steer your week around your best self. You'll identify your peak windows, route heavy work into them, and guard them with decisive no's. You'll add emptiness on purpose to heighten focus, then run a fast feedback loop to refine. The result is a calendar that serves your priorities instead of hijacking them. The scarcity you're ignoring. You have 3 to 5 high-watt blocks per week where your brain operates at peak capacity. These are your prime hours, the windows where complex thinking flows, creative insights arrive, and deep work happens with less friction. Everything else is lower voltage. Still useful, but not prime. Most people waste their peaks on trivia. They schedule meetings during their sharpest hours because someone asked. They answer emails during their creative surge because the inbox is full. They let urgent requests colonize their best windows because they haven't protected them. The cost is invisible but massive. You're spending premium currency on discount work, and the deficit compounds weekly. Peaks are scarce. Wasting them is expensive. When you route admin work to a peak window, you're not just losing that hour, you're losing the only hour that week where you could have solved the hard problem, written the breakthrough proposal, or designed the strategy that moves your career forward. The opportunity cost is staggering, but most people never calculate it because they don't see peaks as a finite resource. Forecasting prevents this waste. When you map your peaks at the start of the week and reserve them for heavy work, you're making a strategic allocation. You're saying, this window is too valuable for anything less than my most important work. That single decision changes everything. Urgent trivia gets routed to lower voltage windows, and your peaks stay protected for the work that actually builds your reputation. Mapping your weekly peaks. The first step is identifying where your high-watt blocks live. Pull up your calendar and look at the week ahead. Based on your energy tracking from the energy equation chapter, you know when you're sharpest. Maybe it's 8 to 11 on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. Maybe it's 2 to 4 in the afternoon on Tuesday and Thursday. The specific times matter less than the pattern. Color code these peak windows. Make them visually distinct so you can see them at a glance. These blocks are now reserved territory. Nothing enters them unless it's heavy draw work, strategy, creation, complex problem solving, or high-stakes decisions. Everything else waits. Route your heavy tasks to these windows first before anything else touches your calendar. If you're writing a proposal, it goes in a peak. If you're designing a new process, it goes in a peak. If you're analyzing data that requires deep focus, it goes in a peak. The rule is simple. Peaks are for heavy work only. No exceptions, no compromises. This reverses the usual calendar logic. Most people fill their calendars reactively. Meetings land wherever there's space, and personal work gets squeezed into the gaps. You're doing the opposite. You're blocking your peaks first, then fitting everything else around them. The shift feels radical because it is. You're treating your best hours as the most valuable asset you have, and you're protecting them accordingly. The commitment gate, your filter for new asks. Every week, new requests arrive. Someone wants a meeting. A project needs your input. A colleague asks for help. Most of these requests are well-intentioned, but not all of them deserve your peak hours, or any of your hours. The problem is that without a filter, you say yes by default and regret it later when your calendar is full and your important work is stalled. The commitment gate is a 3-question filter you run on every new ask before you commit. First question, does it need me uniquely? If someone else can handle it just as well, delegate or decline. Your time is scarce, and spending it on work that doesn't require your specific skills is a misallocation. Second question, does it pay back meaningfully? Not just in money, though that matters, but in learning, relationships, reputation, or strategic value. If the payback is marginal or unclear, it's a no. You're not being selfish, you're being strategic. Every yes to something low value is a no to something high value, and the high value work is what builds your career. Third question, does it fit a peak window? If the task is heavy and the only available time is a peak, you have a decision to make. If it passes the first 2 questions, it might be worth the peak. If it doesn't, it's a no or a later. You're not filling peaks with anything that doesn't meet all 3 criteria. This gate lowers future energy debt. Every misaligned yes you avoid today is energy you'll have tomorrow for the work that actually matters. Over time, the gate becomes automatic. You stop agonizing over decisions because the criteria are clear. The ask either passes the gate or it doesn't. Simple, fast, and ruthlessly effective. The power of strategic emptiness. Most people fear empty space on their calendar. They equate busyness with productivity, so they fill every gap with meetings, tasks, and commitments. But emptiness isn't waste, it's fuel. Strategic idling before a heavy lift primes your brain for insight and reduces the friction of starting. Insert 10 to 15 minutes of empty space before your peak blocks. Use this time for a brief walk, a few minutes of silence, or just staring out a window. You're not procrastinating. You're creating a buffer that lets your mind shift gears. The transition from reactive mode to deep mode isn't instant. It requires a reset, and the reset requires space. This idling also activates incubation. When you give your brain a few minutes to wander before tackling a complex problem, you're allowing subconscious processing to happen. Ideas that were stuck start to loosen. Connections that weren't obvious begin to surface. By the time you sit down to work, you're not starting cold, you're starting primed. The key is predefining what idling looks like so it doesn't turn into distraction. Write down 3 options: a short walk, a few minutes of controlled breathing, or sitting in silence. When the idling window arrives, you pick one and execute. No scrolling, no email, no just checking anything. The emptiness is deliberate, and the payoff is a sharper, more focused entry into your peak block. The weekly calibration loop. At the end of each week, spend 15 minutes reviewing how your peaks performed. Did the heavy work land in the right windows? Did the commitment gate hold, or did low-value requests sneak through? Did the strategic idling help, or did it feel like wasted time? Keep what worked. If a particular peak window consistently produced high-quality output, lock it in for next week. If a specific pre-peak ritual helped you start faster, make it part of the default process. You're not guessing, you're using evidence to refine the system. Tweak what almost worked. Maybe your peak windows are the right length, but scheduled too close together, leaving you depleted by the third one. Maybe your idling buffers are too short to create a real reset. Adjust one variable per week. Test it and see if it improves. Small, repeated tweaks compound into a finely tuned system over months. Cut what didn't work. If a commitment passed the gate but turned out to be a time sink, note it and tighten the criteria for next time. If a meeting invaded a peak and produced nothing useful, relocate it or cancel it. The calibration loop is where you learn what your peaks are actually worth and how to protect them better. This weekly feedback mechanism is what separates people who plan from people who perform. Planning without calibration is just guessing. Calibration turns guesses into data and data into strategy. Over time, your peak forecast becomes more accurate, your gate becomes more selective, and your output becomes more consistent. Pre-peak rituals and fast no scripts. Before each peak block, run a one-liner intent script. Write down the single outcome you're aiming for in 10 words or less. Draft the introduction and outline 3 main points. Analyze the data and identify 2 key trends. The clarity focuses your attention and prevents scope creep during the block. Pair the intent with an environment reset. Close unnecessary tabs, silence notifications, and clear your desk. You're creating a clean slate, so the only thing in front of you is the work. The ritual takes 90 seconds, but it saves you 10 minutes of friction once you start. For declining requests, keep a few no scripts ready so you're not crafting a novel every time you need to protect a peak. I'm at capacity this week, but I can revisit next week if it's still relevant. This doesn't align with my current priorities, but I'd recommend reaching out to name. I have a hard stop at that time. Can we find an alternative? The scripts are polite, clear, and fast. You're not apologizing for protecting your time. You're just stating the boundary. Meeting stacks go in non-peak windows only. If you have 3 meetings in one day, cluster them in the afternoon or late morning when your voltage is lower. This leaves your peaks untouched and reduces the context switching tax. You're batching the reactive work so the creative work has room to breathe. The gains you'll see. When you start forecasting peaks, the results show up in layers. In the first 2 weeks, you'll notice that important work reliably lands in your best windows. You're not scrambling to find time for deep work. It's already blocked, and the rest of the calendar fits around it. Push it further, and you'll see 30 to 50% more high-quality output per peak block. The work you produce during peaks is sharper, faster, and cleaner because you're operating at full capacity instead of half depleted. The quality lift is visible, and people start noticing. At the high end, you build a reputation for shipping the right things at the right times. You're not just busy, you're effective. You're not just responsive, you're strategic. That reputation opens doors, creates opportunities, and compounds into career momentum that can't be bought with raw hours. When forecasting breaks down, 3 failure modes show up repeatedly. First, you overcommit and squeeze your peaks until they're no longer protected. The fix is a hard cap on concurrent priorities. 3 maximum. If a 4th priority arrives, something else has to drop. You can't do everything, and pretending you can just dilutes your peaks. Second, noise invades your peak windows despite your best efforts. An urgent request lands, a meeting gets moved, and suddenly your protected block is gone. The fix is relocating, rescheduling, or fortifying boundaries. If the invasion is external, push back. If it's internal, revisit your gate criteria and tighten them. Third, idling turns into distraction. You sit down for a strategic buffer and end up scrolling for 15 minutes. The fix is predefining your idling options and sticking to them. Walk, breathe, or sit in silence. No screens, no exceptions. The discipline keeps the idling strategic instead of wasteful. Forecasting isn't fragile, but it does require maintenance. The weekly calibration loop is what keeps the system honest and adaptive. You're not locking in a rigid plan. You're testing, learning, and refining based on what actually works. But even perfect forecasting won't matter if you don't own the identity shift that makes all of this stick. And that's where most people's systems collapse. Chapter 9. Own Your Power. You've made it to the end. Not because you were looking for another productivity hack or a motivational speech, but because you recognized something true. The problem was never time. It was energy. And energy, unlike time, is something you can actually control. Everything you've learned in this book points to one shift. From reacting to designing, from grinding to flowing, from hoping to knowing. You're not the person who waits for motivation anymore. You're the person who builds systems that make motivation irrelevant. You're not the person who says yes to everything and regrets it later. You're the person who protects your peaks and ships work that matters. You're not the person who crashes every Thursday and limps through Friday. You're the person who charges deliberately, works in rhythm, and finishes weeks with energy left over. This chapter locks in that identity. We'll compress the entire system into a daily operating stance, show you how it transforms everything from your relationships to your reputation, and send you off with a clear first move you can make today. No more theory, just action. The system in 7 moves. Let's compress everything into the moves that matter. First, the energy equation taught you to allocate watts, not hours. You stopped treating your day like a to-do list and started treating it like a power grid. You mapped your peaks, priced your tasks, and routed heavy work to high-voltage windows. The result was predictable throughput instead of boom-bust cycles. Second, charge cycles showed you that rest isn't weakness. It's precision tooling. You matched recovery to fatigue type, built a restoration stack, and installed rhythm-based work that keeps you near your cognitive peak. You stopped grinding and started flowing, and the quality of your output jumped because you were finally working with your biology instead of against it. Third, Focus Reservoir turned willpower battles into environment wins. You created quiet corridors where deep work happens by default, batched communication to reclaim hours, and used parking lot notes to trap distractions. Your attention became a protected resource instead of a leaking bucket, and the throughput gains were immediate. Fourth, Drain Control eliminated the invisible loops that burn energy without moving work. You installed Name, Aim, Act to break rumination, set ship criteria to kill perfectionism, and used cognitive diffusion to loosen sticky thoughts. You stopped worshiping perfect and started rewarding shipped, and the momentum compounded weekly. Fifth, Action Cost made starting so cheap your future self couldn't refuse. You rewrote tasks as 3-minute openers, preloaded context to eliminate cold starts, and used micro-transitions to slide between tasks without friction. The result was automatic initiation. Work began without negotiation or pep talks. Sixth, Systems Build gave you a living operating system that saves watts by default. You installed daily entropy resets, built a second brain to externalize memory, and ran weekly compounding reviews to amplify what works. The flywheel started spinning, and effort dropped while output climbed. Seventh, Peak Forecast turned your calendar into a performance machine. You mapped your weekly peaks, ran the commitment gate to filter requests, and added strategic idling to prime insight. You stopped treating your calendar like a parking lot and started treating it like the scarce resource it is. These 7 moves aren't separate tactics, they're a unified system. Each one amplifies the others. When you protect your peaks, your focus deepens. When you control drains, your charge lasts longer. When you lower action cost, your systems run smoother. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and the compounding effect is what separates people who try hard from people who win consistently. From willpower to process. Here's what changes when you internalize this system. You stop relying on willpower theatrics. You're not waking up every morning trying to psych yourself into productivity. You're not giving yourself pep talks before you start. You're not white-knuckling through the day, hoping you'll have enough discipline to finish what you started. Instead, you have processes that run whether you feel like it or not. Your quiet corridors are blocked. Your ship criteria are predefined. Your first clicks are staged. The environment is designed to make the right action the easiest action, and the system carries you forward even on days when you're tired, distracted, or unmotivated. This shift makes consistent, high-quality work your default instead of your aspiration. You're not chasing excellence, you're operating from it. The work you produce during peaks is sharp because you're charged and focused. The work you ship meets your criteria because you defined the criteria before you started. The momentum you build compounds because the system amplifies small wins into big gains. You also turn chaos into calm. The scattered reactive days disappear because you've installed order at every level. Daily resets prevent clutter, weekly reviews kill dead weight, and peak forecasting routes work to the right windows. The calm isn't passive. It's active, intentional, and powerful. It's the calm of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and trusts the process to deliver. That calm becomes creative velocity. When you're not burning energy on chaos, drains, and friction, you have watts left over for the work that actually matters. Ideas flow faster, solutions arrive sooner. Shipping becomes routine instead of heroic. You're not just keeping up, you're pulling ahead, and the gap widens every week. The ripple effect on relationships. This system doesn't just change your work, it changes how you show up for the people who matter. When you're not depleted, you're more present. You listen better. You respond with patience instead of irritation. You're not bringing spillover stress from work into your personal life because you've managed the stress at the source. Clear boundaries reduce resentment and last-minute crises. When you protect your peaks and publish your availability, people know when they can reach you and when they can't. That clarity eliminates the passive-aggressive dance of, I'm always available, but secretly resent every interruption. You're setting expectations, and most people respect them once they're clear. Reliability builds trust and opportunity at home and at work. When you consistently deliver what you promise, people start counting on you. They bring you bigger opportunities because they know you'll ship. They trust you with harder problems because they've seen you solve them before. That trust compounds into reputation, and reputation compounds into career momentum. You also model a better way of working for the people around you. When your team sees you protecting focus, shipping consistently, and staying calm under pressure, they start asking how you do it. The system spreads and the culture shifts. You're not just improving your own performance, you're raising the bar for everyone. What you can achieve now. Let's get specific about what this looks like in practice. You'll be able to sustain 2 to 3 deep blocks most days without burnout. That's 4 to 6 hours of high-quality, focused work per week, more than most people produce in a month. The consistency is what matters. You're not having one great week followed by 2 mediocre ones. You're shipping reliably, week after week, and the results stack. You'll experience faster starts and cleaner finishes. The tasks that used to take an hour of warm-up now begin in 30 seconds because you've preloaded context and scripted the first move. The projects that used to drag for weeks now ship on time because you've set clear criteria and stopped gold plating. The friction is gone and the flow is undeniable. You'll develop a strategic no that protects your best yeses. The commitment gate becomes automatic. When a request arrives, you run it through the filter without agonizing. If it doesn't pass, you decline politely and move on. If it does, you route it to the right window and execute. You're not saying no to be difficult. You're saying no to protect the work that actually builds your future. The compounding path forward. Here's the best part. Continued practice improves results with less effort. The systems compound. What felt like work in week 1 becomes automatic by week 12. The drains you had to consciously manage start shrinking on their own because you've built habits that prevent them. The starts that require discipline become reflexive because you've lowered the cost to near zero. Forecasting accuracy rises as you collect more data. In the first few weeks, you're guessing where your peaks are and what tasks fit them. By month 3, you know. You can predict with confidence when you'll be sharp, what work will land cleanly, and how much you can handle without overloading. Fewer surprises drain you because you've learned to see them coming and plan around them. The identity hardens. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who's trying to be more productive and start thinking of yourself as someone who manages energy first. That shift is everything. It changes how you make decisions, how you allocate time, and how you respond to pressure. You're not reacting anymore. You're operating from a stable core that doesn't waver when things get hard. The evidence loop reinforces itself. You protect your peaks and the work you produce is better. You ship consistently and people notice. You manage your energy and you finish weeks with capacity left over. Each piece of evidence strengthens the belief and the belief drives the behavior. It's a virtuous cycle and the momentum is self-sustaining. Your first move today. You don't need to overhaul your entire life to start. You just need to make one move today that sets tomorrow up for success. Here's what that looks like. First, schedule tomorrow's 2 quiet corridors. Open your calendar right now. Find your 2 highest watt windows based on your energy map. Block them. Label them deep work, do not disturb. Make them non-negotiable. This single action protects the most valuable hours you have and ensures they're spent on work that matters. Second, write the first 30 seconds for your most important task. Not the entire task, just the opener. Open the document and write the first heading. Launch the spreadsheet and label the columns. Draft the opening line of the email. Make it so small it feels trivial, because trivial is what breaks inertia. When you sit down tomorrow, you're not starting cold, you're resuming. Third, publish one boundary. Send an email to your team with your office hours or response windows. I check messages at 10 a.m., 12:30 p.m., and 4 p.m. For urgent matters, call me directly. Or post your quiet corridor times on your calendar so people can see when you're unavailable. The boundary doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to exist. You're setting an expectation, and most people will respect it once it's clear. These 3 moves take less than 10 minutes total, but they set the trajectory for everything that follows. Tomorrow starts with protected focus, a cheap first step, and a clear boundary. That's not theory, that's momentum. The identity you're becoming. You don't need permission to flip the switch. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment or the ideal conditions. You don't need to finish reading another book or attend another workshop. You have everything you need right now. The system is in your hands. The only question is whether you'll use it. Protect your wattage. Stop leaking energy into loops, drains, and misaligned commitments. Point your best hours at your best work. Guard your peaks like your career depends on it, because it does. Say no to the noise so you can say yes to what matters. Move. Don't wait for readiness. Don't wait for inspiration. Don't wait for the feeling. Start small, start now, and let the momentum build. The first step is always the hardest, but it's also the only one that matters. Once you're in motion, the system takes over. Small wins. stacked daily, make you unstoppable. Not because you're working harder than everyone else, but because you're working smarter. You're managing the constraint that actually matters, energy. You're building systems that compound. You're protecting focus, controlling drains, and shipping consistently. That's not luck, that's design. The person you're becoming is someone who finishes what they start. Someone who ships on time, every time. Someone who stays calm under pressure because they've built the capacity to handle it. Someone who's known for reliability, clarity, and consistent excellence. That reputation doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you chose to own your power and use it deliberately. You're not chasing energy anymore. You're commanding it. You're not hoping for good days. You're designing them. You're not waiting for the system to work. You're the system, and the system is working. Start today. Protect your peaks. Lower your costs. Ship your work. The rest will follow.